Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for sticking around this Savo. Good to see a few faces here. My name is Ray. I'm one of the co-founders and core developers at DAO, and yeah, today we're here to talk about the future of permissionless markets. Before we actually dive into it, I'll give you a bit of context on what we work on at Tracer, just so you can understand the angle of where we're coming at this from. So at Tracer, we're working on base layer derivatives infrastructure. What I mean by that is we're not building a single derivatives protocol, but instead we're building a suite of derivative tools that enable communities, institutions, and individuals to hedge their risk and hedge their exposure to different types of assets. So we're building an ecosystem of derivatives, essentially. And that's why permissionless markets are really interesting to us. And we think that everyone in the space should actually really care about this problem. So what is permissionlessness in DeFi? Obviously, permissionlessness itself is the ability for anyone and everyone to create new markets, interact with these markets, use these markets, and also view what's going on behind the scenes. Obviously, a lot of this is enabled by the underlying tech, right? Anyone can send a transaction to Ethereum, anyone can interact with smart contracts. But what we're really interested in is how people are building and designing protocols to make sure this sort of permissionless ethos continues to flow through everything we do in DeFi. So I've sort of broken it down into a few little things here that we consider encompassing permissionlessness. So first of all, you've obviously got access. We believe that all these products that are being built should be accessible by everyone. And I'll go into this in a bit more detail later on. But people should have the right to interact with these protocols and deploy their own markets. Next up is there needs to be clearly codified rules and limitations. And this seems at contrast to the first point, right? But what I'm talking about here is we can't just give people tools and say it's limitless. We need to make sure they understand the rules of the game. So I don't know if anyone else here saw the Diamond Hands doco at South by, but there was a part in there basically where the Wall Street Bets community was really outraged because Robinhood basically rugged them, right? They changed the rules of the game midway through. And that's because it wasn't permissionless. The rules weren't defined. Someone could change the rules. And it really angered the whole community. Finally, composability. So something that we all sort of know and love. But the way we're viewing this is it's your right to take your asset, put it somewhere, but then also continue to have a usable asset. So for us coming at it from the derivatives angle, one of the things we're interested in is how can you have derivatives where I can take, say, a 3x long ETH position and then borrow capital against that. So we think these things are super important to keep in mind as we continue building. How this has sort of evolved over time is quite interesting. So I don't know if many people remember the original Shapeshift, but Shapeshift back in the day was a swaps platform. And basically, anyone could go to it, deposit one of the, I think it was 25 assets they supported, and permissionlessly swap between the assets. And this was one of the first really cool instances of like permissionless swapping. Obviously, then we moved on to Uni Swap, which not only revolutionized AMMs, but I think one of the actual biggest things they did was sort of bring to the forefront this permissionless market deployment. So anyone can go to Uniswap, you can bring 2 ERC20 tokens, and you can create your own market. So what that enables is all these projects that wanted to launch a token, you no longer have to go through this process of getting a listing on a centralized exchange and everything that goes with that. Instead, you can just deploy your own market on Uniswap, you can have liquidity, and you can get this token out into the hands of your community. Finally, we sort of end up where we are now. So we have Rari Capital. They do permissionless lending and borrowing. So you can think of it like Compound, but you can have your own version of Compound deployed. What this means is if you're someone that has certain assets you want to borrow against, you no longer need to wait for a DAO to approve that process and approve the token so you can use it in a lending and borrowing market. You can instead just go to Rari and deploy your own market, and you've got native lending and borrowing. And then where we sort of slot in here is Tracer is building the next step in this permissionless evolution. So derivatives are the next thing to sort of come to the forefront, and that's sort of what we're building at the moment. So why is this actually powerful? And I'll move out of the way so people can see this. But there's a few reasons that I sort of highlighted before on why permissionlessness is really powerful. The first really big one, I think, is that it doesn't limit creativity to a single institution. So you're no longer hamstrung by waiting for a DAO to innovate. Instead, anyone can come along and just deploy what they want to deploy, and this sort of breeds an ecosystem of innovation. That sort of follows through into the next point, that it allows people to build on top of you. If you sort of restrict your ecosystem, people won't come along and they won't innovate, right? And this is what we want to see in DeFi. We want to see new innovative products. So by creating a permissionless system, you sort of build this base layer substrate that other people can come and use. And again, this puts the power back in the hands of users, which we think is really, really important. You're not waiting for DAOs to innovate. Users have all the power, and that's one of the original values of DeFi, right? Like, power the individual, let them do what they want. And when you wrap all of this together, you sort of end up where you can build systems that either couldn't exist in traditional finance or exist but in a very different way. And the example I'd like to use here is Curve. So Curve started off as a simple place where you could swap stablecoins. They then added on top a layer of incentivization, so anyone could deploy a stablecoin market and get incentivized to do it. Then Convex came around and sort of gamified that whole experience, and then you have bribes built on top of it again. So there's this whole layering of an ecosystem where at its base, people can just come and deploy markets, and then you have a whole ecosystem built on top of it just to provide liquidity to stablecoins. A lot of what I've talked about so far has purely been in the DeFi realm. And that's good. We're making progress there. But I think as an ecosystem for us to continue to grow, and I think Sid touched on this quite well before, we need to expand outside of DeFi. And to get permissionlessness outside of DeFi, there's sort of a few big stepping stones that we have to cross. And this is quality data and also user safety. So first up on the data side, for anyone that's actually worked at a protocol or tried building financial tools, you know that data is really, really key. Chainlink is making really big waves in this space. They're sort of pushing the industry forward. But what we're aiming to do is to build more infrastructure around data to actually bring off-chain assets on-chain. And this isn't something we're going to do by ourselves. We're leaning on Chainlink. We're leaning on other communities to sort of power this. But this will be the big first step. And what we really need is we need new, unique, innovative price feeds, but we need them to also be updated quite frequently, and they need to be highly secure. The other part of this is user safety. So the one big downfall with a fully permissionless system is you kind of open up the risk, the attack surface, I guess. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when you basically put the power into the hands of the user, whether this is malicious, so there's things like poisonous tokens on Uni Swap, or whether it's just user error and people make mistakes, they shoot themselves in the foot. So we need to sort of build systems that can help educate users and prepare them for this world where they have full access and they have the right to do everything, but that also comes with risks. So some of the things we're focusing on here, again, very clear and transparent rules around what actually goes on, what is the game we're playing, increased user experience, and then finally protection from malicious actors in the space. The one big thing I kind of want to stop and pause on here is, and I think this is really important, not only for how we think about it at Tracer, but the wider DeFi ecosystem, is we can't regress to using user safety as an excuse for gatekeeping. Traditionally, this has sort of been the process, right? In traditional finance, people can't use these tools because there is risk associated with them. But instead of regressing back to gatekeeping and stopping people from using these tools, we think a better path is actually building better systems and helping to educate these users so that then they have access to these powerful tools that, that big institutions can use. So with all of that in mind, I'd sort of like to just step through a few of the things we're doing at Tracer. This is just a big diagram of our whole ecosystem, but I'll sort of talk through some of the more exciting points that are coming up that we're using to unlock full permissionless deployments. So first of all, we've built a product called Perpetual Pools. perpetual pools is a new type of on-chain tokenized leverage derivative. So basically, you can take out a 3x ETH position fully on-chain, and it's tokenized in your wallet. What we're doing here with Perpetual Pools V2 is we're enabling users to deploy any market they want, so fully permissionless deployments. What this means for all of you guys is you can bring along a price feed, you can bring along a settlement asset, so any token you wish, and you can pick a leverage, and you can create your own market. So some of the things we're working on here, we're working with the OHM community at the moment to create GOM settled markets, but pretty much there's a lot of optionality here for communities to take control. So if you want to hedge risk in a certain asset, you want to use your native governance token, and you think you're overexposed to ETH, you can deploy an ETH USD market settled in your native governance token, and you can hedge your exposure there. The second thing we're doing to sort of really push this space forward is we're releasing the Tracer Data Factory. So what this is we've partnered closely with Chainlink to release what's almost a sub-network. So we're working very closely with Chainlink verified node operators and building out the infrastructure to allow people to come along and deploy their own price feeds. So if you want a Tesla price feed deployed, you'll be able to come along to the Tracer Data Factory, you'll be able to request it, get the node operators set up for it, and that feed will exist. And the beauty in this is it's not only usable in Tracer, this will just be a price feed that can be ported anywhere. So everything we're building is fully composable, fully modular, and fully open. You don't have to use it in Tracer if you don't want to. The other big thing on permissionlessness is the accessibility point I talked about before. So we think that this shouldn't be limited to developers, right? Not everyone is going to get into a command line and deploy a new market. So the way we're tackling this is we're having a front end for everything that exists here. So you'll be able to come along without writing a single line of code and deploy a new Chainlink Oracle. You'll be able to come along without a single line of code and deploy a new derivatives market. And we think this accessibility is really key to get people in and to get people innovating on what's possible with derivatives. On the usability point, the other thing that we think is really key is not only having like a basic interface, but also not gatekeeping advanced users from doing what they want. Protocols like Curve and Uni Swap do this quite well, and we've also baked that into our UI. So you'll have warnings, you'll have limitations, but also you'll be able to do what you want while acknowledging the risks. So yeah, that's the Tracer ecosystem. On the UX front, we're always looking for new front-end engineers. We're hiring all the time. We're looking for comms and marketing people. So if this sort of permissionless DeFi future excites you, feel free to come and talk to us. There's a few of us floating around. You can check out Tracer on Twitter. You can check out our current Perpetual Pools release on pools.tracer.finance. So that's live on Arbitrum. And yeah, I think I've still got a few minutes. So if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Yeah. Yeah, so you can bridge any settlement asset, you can bridge over to Arbitrum. So if you wanted to bring something from ETH mainnet and create a new market, you can bring it over through the Arbitrum bridge. But we're also working on then getting more price feeds ported over to Arbitrum as well. So there's like the two key pieces there. Yeah, sweet. Alrighty. Thanks, everyone.